Before he ever spoke a word, his name was decided by sorrow. The night he was born, the midwives whispered to one another. The mother's screams echoed through the small tent, louder than the desert wind. The pain was unbearable. The labor, longer than any woman had endured in the tribe of Judah. And when at last the child came forth, alive, breathing, crying, she looked upon him not with joy, but with trembling lips and tear-stained eyes. She whispered, Jabez. In Hebrew it meant pain, sorrow, grief, burden. She named her son after the storm that brought him forth. The midwives fell silent. Among the people of Israel, a name carried more than sound, it carried destiny. To be called Pain was to wear a prophecy of suffering. And yet, in that dim-lit tent, something unseen stirred, a flicker of divine purpose hidden beneath the cry of a newborn. As Jabez grew, the whispers followed him. Children avoided him in the marketplace, fearful that his name might bring misfortune. Some said, Don't touch him, his name is cursed. Others mocked, calling out, Pain! Here comes pain! His mother tried to protect him, but every time she looked into his eyes, her heart remembered the agony of his birth. Her love was deep, yet shadowed by memory. The name became a chain neither of them could break. He grew up poor, not in coin but in hope. His father's name was never recorded, perhaps gone before Jabez could walk. Alone with his mother, he learned early that life does not hand out mercy easily. The soil resisted his labor, the cattle strayed, and every time something went wrong, the villagers would mutter, It is Jabez, misfortune follows him. Yet, even in that rejection, the young boy began to wonder, if my name is Pain, can pain also teach purpose? The world saw only a curse, but heaven was preparing a lesson that would shake the meaning of destiny itself. Jabez spent his nights outside, lying beneath the stars. He would gaze into the heavens and speak to the unseen God of Israel, not loudly, but quietly, like a whisper between broken hearts. He had heard stories of Jacob wrestling with angels, of Moses speaking to fire, of David singing in caves. And he wondered, does that same God still listen? One evening, as the campfires dimmed and the tribe slept, Jabez sat beside his mother. Her hands, weathered and tired, held a clay lamp. The flame flickered, revealing lines of regret across her face. Why did you name me that, mother? He asked softly. Her eyes welled with tears. Because my son, you were born through sorrow I cannot forget. But perhaps your life will turn my grief into glory. That night, her words planted something inside him. Not bitterness, but faith. The kind that grows quietly in the dark. He began to believe that maybe, just maybe, a name could be rewritten, not by men but by the hand of God. Years passed. Jabez became a man, strong, humble, and wise beyond his years. Yet his name still haunted him. Whenever he walked through the camp, elders turned away. Whenever something broke, his name was the first to be blamed. But one day, during the gathering of the tribes, a teacher from Judah read aloud from the scrolls of lineage. Every name carried a story, the sons of Judah, of Perez, of Hezron, until the scribe reached a line and paused. His eyes fell on the name Jabez. The people murmured. Some smirked, others shook their heads. But the scribe continued, Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. A hush fell. Honorable? The cursed child? The boy of sorrow? No one understood. But Jabez did. Those years of tears had carved depth into him that others lacked. He had chosen goodness despite pain, faith despite mockery. His heart was tender, his will strong, and heaven was watching. That moment, Jabez realized, being born in pain doesn't mean living in it forever. That night, long after the crowds dispersed, Jabez knelt alone. The stars above seemed closer, the air charged with quiet power. His voice trembled as he spoke, not in ritual, but in raw surrender. Oh, that you would bless me indeed, and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain." It wasn't a prayer of greed. It was a cry of transformation. He didn't ask for wealth or fame or revenge. He asked to become the opposite of his name, to no longer be a source of pain, but a vessel of blessing. And heaven, silent for years, listened. The winds shifted. The stars brightened. Somewhere beyond sight, God smiled. That was the night destiny changed. The boy called Sorrow became the man heaven called Honorable. If you've ever felt defined by pain, remember Jabez, the one who dared to pray differently. Take a chill pill and subscribe, where we uncover how God turned his name into a promise. The years passed, but his name followed like a shadow that refused to fade. In the tribe of Judah, names were not just identifiers. They were destinies, prophecies carried from cradle to grave. Jabez, they said, is trouble walking. When he tried to join the workers in the field, they refused. When he offered to help mend a broken fence, they laughed. Even when he prayed aloud in the assemblies, whispers ran through the crowd. Why would God listen to pain? Everywhere he turned, his name became a wall between him and the world. And yet, inside that wall, something sacred began to grow: endurance. He learned to listen more than he spoke, to help without being asked, to labor when no one noticed. What others meant as rejection became his training ground. He was being shaped, quietly, like iron in the fire. But Jabez would soon discover, the heaviest burden isn't the one others place on your back. It's the one you start believing belongs there. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills of Judah, Jabez fetched water from the well. A group of men nearby mocked him. "Here comes pain," one shouted. "Careful," said another. "If he touches the rope, the bucket will break." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Jabez froze. His heart tightened, but he said nothing. He poured the water quietly and walked away, his dignity intact, but his spirit bruised. He reached the edge of the field and sat under a fig tree. The silence pressed heavy. He looked at his reflection in a pool nearby. The same strong arms, the same honest eyes, and yet, all he could hear was that name echoing: pain. He whispered to himself, "Is this who I am meant to be? A reminder of sorrow? A story no one wants to tell?" The reflection rippled, and for a moment, it looked like another face staring back. Older, wiser, unseen. And deep inside, a thought rose like a whisper from heaven. No man's name defines him more than his choices. Tears welled in his eyes. That day something shifted. He would stop being what the world called him. He would start becoming what God saw in him. Jabez began to work in secret. At dawn, when others still slept, he walked into the wild fields where no one dared to plant. The soil there was hard, filled with stones. It was the land others called useless, cursed ground. He smiled. "Then this is where I belong." Day after day, he tilled that barren earth, his hands bleeding, his robe torn, sweat pouring down his face. He spoke to the soil as though it could hear him. "You and I are the same, called worthless, but made by God's hand." Seasons passed. The rains came, and one morning, to the tribe's astonishment, shoots of green began to break through the ground. Jabez's field, once the most despised, became the most fruitful. People whispered again, this time with awe. How could cursed hands bring forth blessing? How could pain produce harvest? But Jabez didn't celebrate. He wasn't planting for fame. He was planting to prove that even pain, when surrendered to God, can grow purpose. In that quiet season, he learned the secret that few men ever discover. Faith is not the absence of pain. It's the decision to believe that pain still has meaning. Prosperity came, but so did temptation. The elders began to notice Jabez. Some approached him with flattery, others with suspicion. A wealthy merchant offered to buy his land, saying, "A man like you deserves honor among the nobles." Jabez smiled faintly. "Honor is not bought. It is borrowed from God." Still, the pressure grew. The same people who once rejected him now wanted his favor. But he remembered the well, the laughter, the scars. He remembered what it felt like to be despised. So instead of storing up his harvests for himself, he gave portions to the poor, to widows, to strangers passing through Judah. He would say, "Let the land that bore pain now feed peace." And in doing so, Jabez began to heal not just his name but his nation. Word spread through the region. A man once cursed now blessed others. And though many could not understand how it happened, one truth became clear. When humility meets faith, heaven moves. One night Jabez could not sleep. The moonlight spilled across his floor like liquid silver. He rose and stepped outside. The wind whispered through the olive trees. He felt peace but also a strange heaviness. He looked toward the heavens and said, "Lord, I have tilled the earth, and you have blessed it, but there is still something missing. My name still bears the weight of sorrow. I want to live in your favor, not just survive it." Silence answered him. He waited minutes, then hours. The stars shimmered, distant and cold. Finally, he bowed his head and said, "If I am still called pain, then let my life bring comfort to those who suffer. If I must bear the name, let it remind me that you turn pain into power." The wind stilled. The night grew warm. And though no voice spoke aloud, peace flooded his soul. The kind of peace that only comes when a man finally accepts his calling. That was the moment Jabez stopped fighting his name and began transforming it. The camp of Judah lay quiet beneath the pale silver of dawn. Smoke from last night's fires drifted faintly through the still air. Somewhere beyond the hills, shepherds called to their flocks, and the sound echoed like memory. Faint, distant, almost forgotten. Jabez sat alone at the edge of the settlement, the fields stretching before him like endless thought. His hands were rough, his heart heavier than the soil he tilled. The harvest was good that year, yet peace escaped him. He had wealth now, enough grain to fill barns, enough honor to silence mockers. Yet something within still ached, something deeper than the wound of words. He looked up to the horizon, where dawn was slowly breaking. "Is this all?" he whispered. "To rise, to labor, to breathe, and to die. Is this the measure of life?" He thought of his mother's tears, of the name she gave him, Jabez, the child of sorrow. Perhaps he thought that name was not just a mark of pain, but a call to find something higher, a purpose beyond his suffering. For the first time he felt it, a pull from the unseen, a calling quiet yet irresistible. That night, Jabez left his tent before the moon rose. He walked alone, carrying nothing but a staff. The wind whispered through the reeds, brushing his robe like unseen fingers. He climbed the rocky path that led to the high place, a mountain where prophets once prayed, where Abraham had called upon God generations before. Every step was hard. The stones cut his feet. The darkness seemed alive with questions. But Jabez did not turn back. When he reached the summit, he looked over the sleeping valley, the lights of Judah flickering below like dying embers. He fell to his knees. For years he had carried silence in his heart. For years he had spoken to men who could not hear. But now he was ready to speak to the one who always listened. He raised his hands and closed his eyes. The wind grew still. The stars brightened. It was as if the heavens leaned closer. He whispered, trembling, "God of Israel, if you truly see me, then see me now." And the mountain held its breath. Jabez's voice broke, but his spirit burned. Every word that left his lips carried the weight of years, of shame, rejection, endurance, and longing. He cried, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed, and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain." Each line was more than a request. It was rebellion against the destiny others had written for him. He didn't ask for riches, though he was poor once. He didn't ask for revenge, though he had been mocked. He didn't ask for power, though he could have used it. He asked for transformation. He asked to be changed at the root, for his life to become a testimony that names do not decide destiny, and pain does not define purpose. The words echoed into the night, and though no thunder roared, no fire fell, something eternal shifted. The heavens, once silent, seemed to tremble with response. For in that moment, God heard him, not because his voice was loud, but because his heart was true. When dawn returned, the mountain was quiet again. Jabez remained there, eyes closed, face wet with tears. There was no vision, no angel, no sound. Yet he knew something had changed. He rose slowly, feeling a strange warmth across his chest. Not from the sun, but from within. The burden he had carried all his life felt lighter. The shame that once haunted him had no voice left to speak. As he descended the mountain, everything looked different. The fields greener, the air clearer, the birds louder. Yet he knew the world hadn't changed. He reached his land, knelt, and pressed his hand into the soil. The ground felt alive. His spirit felt whole. And when his servants came running, shouting that the borders of his land had mysteriously expanded overnight, new streams flowing, new fruit trees sprouting, he understood. God had answered, not through spectacle but through silent power. The boy named Pain was now the man whom God had blessed. Years later, the people of Judah would speak his name with reverence. Children born in his region were blessed in his honor. Farmers prayed in his fields, saying, "The land of Jabez never fails." The elders, who once mocked him, now sought his counsel. They would sit beneath his fig tree, asking, "How did you do it? What did you say that made heaven move?" Jabez would smile softly and reply, "I did not move heaven. I simply opened my heart wide enough for heaven to enter." He lived quietly after that. No crown, no army, no city bore his name. Yet his legacy outlived kings, outshone warriors, and outlasted monuments. Because somewhere in the sacred scrolls of Israel, amid genealogies and forgotten names, one line remained, small but eternal, and God granted him what he requested. It was not written in thunder, but in eternity's ink. The man born in pain became the man who changed his destiny, not by might, not by lineage, but by prayer. And from that day forward, Jabez became a symbol for every soul who dares to believe that God listens still, that destiny is not sealed by suffering, and that even one whispered prayer spoken in faith can shake heaven itself. The morning after his prayer, Jabez walked through the valley where his field met the horizon. The dew shimmered like jewels across the leaves, each drop reflecting the rising sun. But something was different. The air carried a fragrance of life, new, sweet, and full. He knelt and pressed his fingers into the soil. It was soft and moist, though no rain had fallen in weeks. The same ground that once resisted his labor now yielded without struggle. Where there had been weeds, shoots of grain rose strong and tall. He felt no thunder or vision, just a deep, steady peace that wrapped around him like an unseen cloak, the peace of a man whose cry had reached the ear of heaven. For years, people had called his land barren. They said nothing good would grow there, much like the way they spoke of him. Yet now, both man and soil had found favor. The morning wind moved through the crops, whispering like a psalm. It was as if the earth itself was giving thanks, not to the strength of Jabez, but to the mercy of his God. Weeks passed, and something miraculous unfolded. The borders of Jabez's field began to change. Streams that once flowed around his land now bent toward it. Trees that had belonged to neighboring grounds bore fruit within his fences. Even the boundary stones seemed to have shifted overnight. At first, the people murmured, "How can this be? Did Jabez move the stones?" But when they came to see, They found the truth undeniable. The land had indeed expanded. Not by trickery, but by providence. The elders gathered, puzzled. Never in Judah's history has such a thing happened, one said. The earth itself honors him. And Jabez, humble as ever, simply bowed his head. He knew this was not man's doing. It was heaven's signature upon his obedience. But with greater blessing came a greater test. More land meant more responsibility. More harvest meant more mouths to feed. Would he use the abundance for himself, or as an offering back to God? He stood at the edge of his new fields, gazing over the lush expanse, and whispered, "This is not mine, this is yours." From that day, his land became known as the portion of mercy. Blessing attracts attention and sometimes envy. When Jabez's prosperity spread across Judah, travelers came from distant villages to trade, learn, and sometimes to steal. One night, a band of raiders approached, armed and hidden beneath the shadows of the hills. They sought to take his grain and gold. But as they neared his dwelling, a violent wind rose from the east. The torches in their hands flickered, then died. Thunder rolled though the sky was clear. The men fled in terror, claiming they had seen a flame without fire, standing guard over Jabez's home. When morning came, Jabez found his storehouses untouched. Not a single door broken, not a single sheep missing. He looked up to the sky, awestruck. "Your hand has been with me," he said softly. The same God who had enlarged his territory had also surrounded it. And so the man once haunted by pain now slept in peace, covered by the unseen protection of divine favor. From that day, people began to call his land not just blessed, but guarded by heaven. Years of blessing followed. Jabez's home became a place of refuge. Widows found shelter under his roof. Orphans worked his fields and called him father. Travelers rested under his fig trees and spoke of his kindness across Israel. But even as his fame grew, Jabez never forgot the night he prayed alone on the mountain. He never forgot the silence that became his answer, the tears that became his covenant. Each morning he returned to that same high place, now a small altar of stones, and prayed again, not for more blessing, but for gratitude. "If you have enlarged my borders, Lord," he would say, "enlarge also my heart." The villagers often saw him walking there at dawn, barefoot, robe fluttering in the wind. A man who had everything, yet still sought nothing but the presence of God. And that was his secret. He didn't live from blessing, he lived for the blesser. That was why his peace remained when others' riches failed them. He understood what many never learn. Miracles fill barns, but only God fills the soul. When Jabez grew old, his beard silver and his hands frail, he called his servants and kin together. The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky crimson and gold, the same colors that once filled the dawn of his prayer. He spoke softly, his voice like wind through olive leaves. "Do not remember me for what I had," he said, "but for what God made of me. The world called me pain, but heaven called me purpose. Let my life remind you that no wound is wasted when placed in his hands." His children wept. The servants bowed. The earth grew still. And when he passed, they buried him beneath the fig tree that had stood beside his first prayer field. The soil there, once cursed, now yielded blossoms even in drought. Generations later, scribes of Israel recorded his name among the honorable men of Judah. No crown, no conquest, no prophecy. Just this, a single verse that echoed through eternity. And Jabez was more honorable than his brothers, and God granted him what he requested. His story became a whisper among the broken, a light among the forgotten, a reminder that pain, when surrendered, can become a prayer, and a prayer, when pure, can become a legacy that never dies.